Good morning. Welcome to Mainline Unitarian Church. I'm Barbara Colton and a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to Partner Church Sunday, our celebration of our long partnership with Barvalva Unitarian Church in Romania. Amid the shock and grief of Renee's Goods killing in Minneapolis this week, another mother lost to violence, we gather this community to lament. We gather to recenter and renew our faith in humanity and one another. Here, in this place, love's deep roots ground us, giving us strength for resistance and renewal. Together, we nurture one another with care and courage, celebrating the creativity and the beauty from our growing diversity, knowing that every act of kindness, every truth spoken in love enriches our community and the wider world. In this place, we offer a community and a legacy of compassion and courage to all who enter, grateful to share this time of worship with you all today. A warm welcome to you all, our visitors, to our returning friends, and to all of you joining us online. If you're visiting, please linger after the service and join us across the hall for coffee and conversation, so we have a chance to hear your stories and to share ours. Also, you will see the back of your order of service. There's a listing of some upcoming events. Be sure to note those, but also to go online and take a look at our website on a regular basis to see all the things that keep happening. We've got a lot going on here. Leading our service today is our senior minister, Reverend John Morehouse. And on this celebratory Sunday, we are supposed to be joined by our friend and minister of the Thomas Paine UU Fellowship, Reverend Andrew Weber, but it looks like he may be caught in traffic and hasn't yet made it. So we look forward to him joining us. And joining Reverend John for the service today are our Director of Learning and Family Ministries, Don Starr Sarahs-Borchelt, our music director, David Brown, on violin, and Kate Saylor on violin, and Jodie Brown on piano. And our worship associate today is Travis Billesbach-Scholl, and we couldn't do the service without our wonderful media service team. So please take a moment, and feel the ground of your feet beneath you, and join me in affirming our mission statement together. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith.
When a rather large group of us went on a pilgrimage to Varfalva to visit our partner church in the summer of 2024, naturally, the first thing I did when I set foot into a Unitarian church was to start looking through the hymnal. And I know maybe a collective 20 to 30 words of Hungarian, so it didn't help me to understand the language, but I was looking at the tunes, and I was struck by a couple that were actually familiar to me because they've been adapted and are in our hymnal. Find a Stillness is actually one of our hymns, some of you recognize, and it was the first tune I recognized in the Transylvanian Unitarian hymnal. After this week, ICE, Venezuela, I was thinking a lot about finding a stillness, and I don't think we're going to find that stillness unless we're willing to make some noise.
Bye. Our chalice lighting this morning is Sacred Dissent by Reverend Michelle Collins. Welcome, all who are restless for a world renewed. We come carried by ancestors who refused the silence of despair and dared to sing a new song. Their courage whispers through us still. Today, we resist by showing up together. We resist by keeping faith with what is not yet. Our gathering is itself an act of sacred dissent, calling us to rise and unite as co-creators of a freer tomorrow. Now please rise in body or spirit and join us in hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
Once upon a time, a peacock, puffed up with vanity, met a crane, and to impress him, spread his gorgeous tail in the sun. Can you imagine that? Do you know what a peacock's tail looks like? All the shimmering feathers. "Look," said the peacock, "what do you have that compares with this? I am dressed in all the glory of the rainbow, while your feathers are gray as dust." Do you know what a crane looks like? They're kind of funny looking, actually. They have like long, stocky legs that they walk through the water on, and they have long, narrow beaks, and they like poke their beaks down in the water to catch the fish. But they're kind of like, they're not like the prettiest birds. They're beautiful, but they're not like pretty. So to help the peacock realize how its boasting makes others feel, the crane spread his broad wings and flew up towards the sun. Because peacocks can fly, but they can't fly very far, especially the males with the big, huge tails. The females have more reasonable tails and can fly a little bit better, but the males with the big tails, it's kind of like chickens, like they can hop fly. But cranes migrate hundreds or thousands of miles sometimes. "So follow me if you can," said the crane. But the peacock stood where he was among the birds of the barnyard, while the crane soared into freedom, far up into the blue sky. We Unitarian Universalists come from a tradition of religious freedom. We value the freedom to find our own beliefs according to our own inner wisdom, learning, and growth. We choose that freedom over and over again in different times and places, over fitting in and looking better. It's okay if we look good. But I invite the children and youth to join me in the atrium so I can get you sorted out and everybody can get where they belong for the rest of the morning.
The recipient for our January offering outreach is Pottstown Beacon of Hope. Pottstown Beacon of Hope is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides shelter and support for individuals experiencing homelessness in the Pottstown community. Its mission, based on hope, love, and grace, is to provide year-round emergency shelter and to work together towards creating a better community for all. Pottstown Beacon of Hope builds trusting relationships with its guests and supports them by identifying their specific needs, collaborating with service providers to address those needs, and equipping guests with the skills necessary for them to stabilize in the community and secure lasting indoor housing. To make a cashless donation, whether watching remotely or here in the sanctuary, please follow the instructions that you see on the screen or on the back page of the order of service. The offering will now be gratefully received. Will the ushers please come forward?
If you don't recognize the violinist standing beside me, this is Kate Saylor. And Kate is a longtime Unitarian Universalist, but a recent member of this community, and a fabulous violinist. No pressure. She's a classical player, she's a fiddler, and she's the kind of person who, for example, last night at our swing dance, asked if she could just borrow my violin in the middle of the concert, jumped up on stage with the band, playing tunes she's never heard before, and sounded like she'd been playing the whole time. I did know them. Okay, you knew some of them. And I decided that Béla Bartók, who is unequivocally the most famous Transylvanian composer, and the most famous Unitarian composer, would be the right fit for this service. He composed a set of 44 very famous duos based on Transylvanian folk songs. We've selected a couple of them to play for the service.
It is our custom to share our personal joys and sorrows, expecting to be heard, accepted, and supported. Candles of Community is our ritual of personal sharing and support. After each candle is lit, please join me in saying, "We hold you in our hearts." We light a candle of joy as Jenna Maynard Baker shares that Irene Maynard, a long-term devoted member of this congregation since 1984, celebrates her 90th birthday this Monday. For Irene Maynard, Jenna Maynard Baker, and all their friends and family, we hold you in our hearts. And for all the joys and all the sorrows, too deep for words, we light a candle and we hold you in our hearts. Our reading today is a section of the Edict of Torda from 1568. Ministers should everywhere preach and proclaim the gospel according to their understanding of it. And if their community is willing to accept this, good. If not, however, no one should be compelled by force if their spirit is not at peace. No one is permitted to threaten, imprison, or banish anyone because of their teaching, because faith is a gift from God.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful day. Even though it's not so beautiful outside, it's beautiful in here. And it's great to see so many friends and new people that we have yet to make friends with, and to our friends online. But I want to extend a special welcome to our partner church in Warszawa. The communion cloth over the small table here is connected, is holding underneath it a computer, which says something about communion in the 21st century. But more importantly, it allows our friends in Warszawa who are online to see us. So let's first let them see us and wave hello. All right. And then up there. That work, Sam? Did we do it? All right, we did it. Amazing. When Sam explained how he was going to do this, he lost me after the first sentence. I was like, okay, Do you need me to turn this off? You're going to turn it off? Okay, because it's going to feedback. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Reverend Joel. Looks good.
Hello, Professor. And thank you to be your partner.
Thank you, Reverend Joel. I can't see what's going on. Is it good? Okay, good. All right. So I'm a rarity in Unitarian Universalism. I'm a fifth-generation Unitarian. Our grandchildren are seventh generation. I mention this not for the accolades, but to give you some context to my own journey into this ministry, into this faith. When Francis and I decided that I would enter seminary at the Meadville-Lombard Theological School at that time, part of the University of Chicago, in the late 1980s, we did so with fewer reservations than perhaps we should have had, although we had plenty. And that's another story. I was to inherit a little money. When I turned 30 years old, I was 29 at the time. And I knew very little about our faith, actually, even though I had grown up in a Unitarian fellowship in Croton-on-Hudson, New York. I graduated in 8th grade from Sunday school, and I had they gave me a World Religions Bible. Now, for geeky people like me, parenthetically, it's a misnomer, because a Bible only refers to the scriptures of Christianity and Judaism and not to the other writings that are sacred in world religions, such as the Tao Te Ching, the Buddhist Sutras, the Quran, or the Mahabharata. Before applying to graduate school, I went to New York City to visit Don Harrington, Reverend Don Harrington, who was then senior minister of our community church of New York and an old family friend. As we sat down in his office, he began by telling me something that I did not know. He said, "Did you know that you have actually two grandfathers, great-grandfathers, who are Unitarian ministers, one by marriage and one by birth?" I said, "What? You don't know that, do you? Because I imagine that your father, who was a good friend of Don's, didn't tell you that. The Reverend Daniel Webster Morehouse. And he went to the same seminary that you're considering going to, but when he went to it in 1880s, it was still in Meadville, Pennsylvania, before it merged with the University of Chicago and Lombard College, which was a Universalist college in Lombard, Illinois. My great-grandfather was a district superintendent of Western New England, and he is buried in Springfield, Massachusetts. All of this I did not know. I wondered why my grandfather, his son Edward Morehouse, had not told me, or my father Ward Morris had not told me. And when I went back to talk to my dad about this, I said, "What up?" And he said, "Well, I don't really have a lot of use for ministers. They're usually a little too preoccupied with matters of the heart, and I think they need to be preoccupied with justice. And besides, I didn't want to cloud your choice." Much later, when working on my doctorate at the same graduate school, I would discover deep in the archives my great-grandfather's sermons, none of which I can read because his handwriting was so flourishy Victorian, his book plate that he stamped his books with, and some of his journals. Two of those things were gifted to me in my graduation with my doctorate in 2015. Part of the reason my forefathers did not feel it was necessary to share this ancestry, I think, is this fierce belief we have as Unitarians that we are free to decide what we believe. The freedom of religion is so important to us. Indeed, our heritage stretches back to our roots in Transylvania and also Great Britain, and then the United States. And I want to say here that it's very important to understand that Transylvanian Unitarianism is a viable and living faith. And while part of our roots as American Unitarian Universalists comes from that tradition, They stand on their own, in their own free faith. The freedom to choose how we worship is part of what makes us what is known with the dissenting church tradition, the dissenting church tradition. And we join hands there with Baptists and Congregationalists and Quakers. We were never supposed to fit into the orthodoxy, or I would say as American UUs, into Christianity as it's seen today. January 13th marks the 457th anniversary of the Edict of Torda, the foundational document enacted by King John Sigismund of Transylvania and his prophet, his court preacher, Francis David. As my colleague John Gibbons wrote, many UU congregations view anything before consolidation of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961 as ancient history. Even our 19th century forebears are more often understood as quaint characters. Mary Louise Alcott, or Henry David Thoreau, or Ralph Waldo Emerson. And when we need the authority of these transcendent speakers in the past, we don't really understand the faith that they embraced, which is very different than ours. But what they did have, and what we still have, is this belief in the freedom to believe. The 16th century was a laboratory of religious reformation in Europe, succeeding in the establishment of the Lutheran, then the Anglican, and the Reformed variations of Christianity in so many different forms that there are hundreds and hundreds of denominations and sects today. But our Unitarian Universalist traditions find closer affinity to the radical reformers, this is what John Gibbons said, who are unsatisfied with the results and pressed for further changes in theology and practice and authority. Because to believe in anything other than the orthodoxy in the 16th century could get you killed. In Transylvania, these radical reformers found some traction. King John Sigismund took interest in further reform and supported a series of theological debates in the 1560s. Close at hand was his court physician, George Beardarta, who was also a supporter of this radical religious idea that you were free to believe whatever you want. And he was familiar with the anti-Trinitarian writings of Michael Servetus, who John Calvin burned at the stake in Geneva. And further Italian theologians earlier in that century who also thought about the freedom to believe and understand God in the way that made most sense to you. After a decade of theological debate and the influence of David and Banarta, King Sigismund's Diet of Torda concluded his theological explorations January 13, 1568, issuing a statement of religious tolerance, which you heard just read. There is much in the Edict of Torda that points to our tradition that we continue to rely on, the grounding commitment that faith is not endowed with purpose by governments or empires, but by the sacred and the holy that rests in our own hearts. That the freedom of the pulpit to speak the truth in love as we see it, and the freedom of the pews, or in this case the chairs, to respond to that is also part of this tradition. And the stirrings of our commitment to resist authoritarianism as a religious practice, such as we are doing this very day, and such as our ministers did in Minneapolis on Wednesday, is signaled in the Edict of Torda. Indeed, the deep faith in our freedom binds us to our partner congregation in Warsaw. It's a long and wonderful and warm and fruitful partnership. But freedom is only one route to our resistance towards the orthodoxy and the abuse of power. And the other is tolerance and respect. I think one of the pitfalls of reliance on individual choice in matters of faith is that we sometimes ignore the needs of others, or we weaken the communal bonds of being together as a congregation. For years, when I was a younger minister, I taught the course called Building Your Own Theology. Who here has taken that? Anybody taken that course? Some of you are still out there. Building Your Own Theology. Wonderful course, fabulous course. Until I came to believe that individual faith is not what our ancestors envisioned. We're not just a bunch of individuals running around getting whatever we want from the spiritual smorgasbord, right? A little inspiration here, a Jewish Seder there, a Buddhist meditation over there. That's not what this means. We are also bound, as we are bound to our partner church, to one another. It's not my way or the highway as Unitarian Universalists. It means, this may come as a shock to you, you don't always get what you want. which is why my doctoral thesis took the idea of building our own theology and rethought it as a new curriculum, which is entitled Creating Theology Together. The final, or the next root of our resistance is justice. Justice is very important. Reverend Ashley Haran, the vice president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, is based in Minneapolis. In fact, she lives in the same neighborhood where Nicole Good was murdered by that ICE agent on Wednesday. And she was there to protest the shooting and was pepper sprayed by the federal agents. And she told Religious News Services that she, quote, said, "My Unitarian Universalist faith is the belief that every single human life has inherent worthiness and dignity, and that we are all interdependent as human beings and neighbors. The combination of these things means there's actually not a question about showing up for something like this. The greatest form of sin," she said, "is feeling like that we are separate from other people." Justice is what love looks like in action. And justice is one of the roots that feeds our faith, which is why we're showing up at protests, which is why our church is supporting the return of John Vincent, a local Cameroon man kidnapped out of his car by ICE agents while taking his daughter to school in King of Prussia. John is here on a legal visa from Cameroon and cannot return to his country for fear of his life. I want you to know that on behalf of all of you, we have made a very large donation to his legal defense. And we will continue to use whatever resources we have to fight this injustice, because it is a proud part of our heritage as a free faith and a dissenting church. John Gibbons wrote, "There was a time in the 18th and 19th centuries when Unitarians predicted the end of religion, that reason would triumph and the need for scripture would cease to be. Our Universalist forebears predicted a time when hell would cease to be the burning issue that it is today. And indeed, as science revealed more and more about our world and the universe, it was not quite what it had been. And universalism is still a viable part of our theology. It's part of why we are Unitarian Universalists, because we believe in the prime directive that God is love, and indeed love is at the center of everything we do." The partner church movement, which links our congregation with our partner church in Warfova, are here with congregations across Romania and other parts of the world because we realize the need to connect internationally. The partner church movement, as Kathy Cordes will tell you, has its origins in the aftermath of the war where North American congregations raised funds to replace steeple bells that had been melted down for armaments. Today, more than 50,000 Unitarians live in Transylvania, and they are a double minority. Amidst the Romanian majority, they are ethnically and culture and language Hungarian, and amidst the dominant Orthodox religion, they are Unitarian. But for all those Unitarians and otherwise that thought religion would fade away, I got news. Not a chance. Religion is more about giving answers to unanswerable questions. Our God is not the God that fills in the gaps. Rather, religion is about finding greater meaning in our evolving universe and our own lives, punctuated as they are by the troubles of our wounded world. It's about living a moral life, more than what you want to believe. In my mind, that means that this religion will live on. Our religion will live on in the roots that we have watered for generations. And now I'm going to invite to our pulpit the Reverend Andrew Weber to say a little bit more about this idea of a free faith.
Good morning. Eshionaput barataim varfavan. Every time I travel to Transylvania, my understanding of our religious heritage deepens. And being in that physical space, in that place where historical events happened, helps me to contextualize and to remember our heritage. But I also learn about living a relevant faith. I learn about my own religious beliefs, my own convictions. Because Unitarian Universalism shares historic roots with Transylvanian Unitarianism. But Transylvanian Unitarianism is not our ancestor. That's a dangerous place for us to fall into, to say, oh, they are our ancestors. We have gone beyond and above them. Transylvanian Unitarianism is our sibling, just as modern, just as world-saving, just as love-promoting as our faith. And I want to share an instance, an example where I deepened my faith and my historical knowledge. This is a little bit after the Edict of Torda, which we heard briefly in 1568. There was a group of Unitarian Christians who started adopting elements of Judaism. And this makes sense, actually, because as many reformers wanted to go back to the roots of Christianity, it made sense that some of them said, well, let's go to the religion that preceded Christianity. So these Unitarian Jews in Transylvania became known as the Sabbatarians. It was named after observing the Sabbath, Sabbatarian. And in a land known at that time for religious tolerance, this group of Jews formed, who had no ancestral, no blood ties to Israel, but rather ties of faith, ties of religious conviction. It was an unusual occurrence culturally, but sadly, the history of this community parallels the hate, the anti-Semitism, the persecution which Jews see all over the world. The Sabbatarians did not gain many adherents over the centuries, and by the 19th century, there was a majority in only one village, Bozod-Újfalu. And at the end of the Second World, Hungarian Transylvanians, including this village of Bozod-Újfalu, found themselves, as Reverend John said, double minorities inside Romania, by religion and by ethnicity. Romania at this time was under communist rule, and Nicolae Ceausescu was especially harsh to both the ethnic and the religious minorities. And right before his fall from power, he decided to eradicate Hungarian Transylvanians by destroying their villages, deporting their population. And in 1989, the river which flowed through Bozod-Újfalu was dammed, the buildings flooded, and the inhabitants moved out. The Sabbatarians, Bozod-Újfalu, are no more. Now, Reverend John spoke about our history from hundreds of years ago, and this story, although starting at that time, is much more recent. This happened during most of our lifetimes. The village was flooded and its inhabitants displaced less than 40 years ago. And all that was left of Bozod-Újfalu were the tops of a few buildings reaching up out of this human-made lake, and some tombstones at a graveyard that was a little bit higher elevation than the village. Now, the history and my personal story here overlap. At the outskirts of Bozod-Újfalu, where a memorial park has very recently been erected. The memorial park has a path which mirrors the main street of the village, and it has markers at each symbolic place where there was a building, and it has photographs, memorial photographs of the time when the village was still around. In 2018, I co-led a mindfulness pilgrimage where we stopped at this memorial and took a moment to look at the photos, to walk through the symbolic representation of the town, and to contemplate religious persecution, religious tolerance, and our faith. Now, as our group shed their packs and began walking, I took on my shepherding leadership role, and I was making sure everyone was drinking water, taking a rest, keeping an eye on our backpacks, making sure everything was safe. And as such, I took note of a boy who was selling hand-woven trinkets and milling about the area. And I'm not proud of this, but this is what happened. I responded to this young person as a scared foreigner. I assumed that he was going to either rifle through our stuff or interrupt our deeply spiritual time. And so I did the classic racist, ageist thing that so many young men of color experience here. I kept an eye on him, and I kept an eye on our bags. But rather than live into my negative expectations, this boy came up to me and started chatting. He reached out over this gap that I had created, and he started chatting with me. Our conversation was very shallow at the beginning, but it grew deeper. First, he wanted to know, was that member of our group Jean-Claude Van Damme? This was not the case, I assured him. It was not. But there we opened a more, and he told me about his grandmother who had lived in Bozo-Uifalu. He told me that if we looked at one of the memorial plaques, you could actually see her stern face looking out of her house. And there I was, living into my racism, ageism, cultural privilege, being shown how to live my faith, being shown to recognize what I had missed, namely this boy's humanity. Martin Buber, a Jewish theologian, has said, when two people relate to each other authentically and humanely, God is the electricity that surges between them. How humbled and honored I have been to have that authenticity, that humanity offered to me. Right? This is where the history starts coming into the theology. The history of Unitarian Universalism, the history of Transylvanian Unitarianism, the history of Sabbatarianism. They're all tales showing us the reality of intolerance and the power of reaching beyond differences. My personal story is one showing the stark reality of intolerance and the power of reaching across those differences. Now, I want to bring it a little bit closer to home, and closer not just to home, like geographically closer, but also to mainline Unitarian Church. 2 years ago, members of this congregation went on a pilgrimage to Varfalva, where we met many of these wonderful people in person. We visited our partner church, and the trip taught us about these overlapping histories of Unitarian Universalism and Transylvanian Unitarianism. And it also helped us nourish and deepen the personal connections we have with the people living there. My family first visited Varfalva in the 1990s, and over the years we've become very, very close friends with the family there, the Vadjas family. And as with all relationships, it took time, it took work. We began our journey sleeping in their house, being guests, spending hours, literally hours, talking about the price of tomatoes in the market. And it's hours because Google Chat did not exist, Translate did not exist. We had a phrase book, and we were translating between tomato and paradicom and how much it cost and what currency was that in, and oh my gosh, right? There was a language barrier. There was a cultural barrier. But we knew that our siblings in faith still had a foundation of love, and that if we tried hard enough, we could bridge that gap. We have gone cucumber picking in their fields with them. We have offered help in the kitchen. We have worshiped with them in their church, and we were hosted as guests in their house and treated as family. If you have been on a trip, you know this. You probably remember the people who hosted you and how intimate and how close staying in someone's house can be. Or you might know the inverse. If you hosted a Transylvanian choir member last spring, or were here when Mainline invited members of the Varfalva Church to visit us. The Transylvanians rode around the main line and saw the stark differences of our lives. They experienced Costco, which was a highlight of the trip. They worshiped with us in our church, and they were guests in our houses and treated as family. Now, just as all relationships, our partner faith relationship was kindled and grown and strengthened through the sharing of our lives, sharing the wonderful, sharing the amazing, sharing the sad and the mundane. I'm going to end this talk about pilgrimage, this talk about connections, with an example of the depth of our friendship. On September 11th, 2001, the World Trade Center was attacked. There was communication chaos, right? Confusion across the country, and especially on the East Coast. I was living in Pittsburgh, and it was very difficult to get in touch with my parents here in Eastern PA. And when I finally got through, I remember hearing that the Vadjas family had called from Varfalva, right, to see if we were okay. Now, although now there are paved streets and there's high-speed internet, in 2001, Varfalva had neither paved streets nor high-speed internet, and the phone system was an actual switchboard. So for them to call my parents in Wayne, Pennsylvania, they contacted their switchboard. The switchboard hooked them up to the larger city, which went to a larger city and then international, right? Wow, connecting through this amazing logistical barrier, eventually international, without translating apps, right? With only 2 or 3 shared words. I think they said everything's okay in both languages. There's 2 words, okay? Everything's okay. Minden Renben. Love was given. Love was received. That's the power of pilgrimage. The power of pilgrimage is personal connections, right? I met a young man who lived the faith I was trying to preach and trying to promote. Our family and the Vajas family are lifelong friends. Mainline Unitarian Church and the Warfava congregation have a generations-long partnership based on a foundation of personal relationships. You who have been guests, you who have been hosts, you know the power of these personal connections. You know these experiences deeper than words can express. The charge is not just to engage in partnership church events. Yeah, do it. Welcome your partners to Devon again. Go on a trip to Transylvania, absolutely, but go further. Go further. Our life-saving faith charges us to see the divine humanity in everyone we meet, to recognize and welcome their worthiness, their dignity, from the 1500s in Transylvania to this week, right here. Oh, it's so needed. The charge remains the same. Dissent, reach out with love and care. Dissent with love and care. Introduce people to one another. That's radical. Absolutely it is. Be open to those introductions. See beyond our differences and make deep and lasting connections. Amen. And Visant Latashra.
Thank you, Andrew. That was fabulous. It's great to have you all here. In a second, I'm going to have David introduce the hymn because I can't possibly do that. But also, after the hymn, let's all have a seat, and Reverend Jolt, our good friend from our congregation, our partner congregation in Warfava, will have a greeting and a benediction, and then we'll go to our postlude. So, David, why don't you introduce the hymn?
I'm about to realize some of your fears, and indeed I'm going to make you sing in Hungarian. But we're going to be following slides that are transliterations of the Hungarian, and it's quite easy to pronounce if you follow the slides. Some of you already know this hymn, Székely Áldás, which is both in English and in Hungarian. There is a Hungarian part and then an English part, and then we're going to try to sing them together. And the choir, who is also learning this in real time, will help me to lead it. Right? So let's start with the Hungarian verse. Sam, would you put up the first slide? I'm going to sing with you. If you know this tune already, feel free to start with me, and then we're going to try it again. Would you give us the introduction, please? Hall hit, all szeretet, all szeretet, all béke, all béke, all áldás, all áldás, all Isten, all Isten, all szükség nincsen. Beautiful, let's try it again. Hall hit, all szeretet, all szeretet, all béke, all béke, all áldás, all áldás, all Isten, all szükség nincsen. Beautiful, not so bad, right? Now, actually, the English verse or the English melody is a little bit trickier, but of course we know the language. So the next slide, please, goes like this. Where there is faith, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is blessing. Where there is blessing, there is God. Where there is God, there is no need. Let's do it again. Where there is faith, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is blessing. Where there is blessing, there is God. Where there is God, there is no need. So what I'd like to do at this point, I want to have the alto section and the bass section lead the Hungarian, and that's going to be this side of the room. And then the sopranos and the tenors are going to sing the English on this side of the room. Don't worry, we're then going to swap. We'll get to do both. Here we go, let's try it. Here we go, Hungarian. Oh, where there is austerity. Now let's reverse. All he there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. All beautiful, everyone.
Dear friends and partners in faith from Mainline, as we step in this new year of 2026, we send our warmest greeting and blessing to your congregation from Várfalva, Transylvania, the historic lands where our shared faith first took root. January is an important month for us, as it marked the anniversary of Edict of Torda about religious freedom, proclaimed in January 1568. As we celebrate more than 400 years of this visionary decree, we remember the courage of the Diet of Torda and Ferenc David, who first declared the faith is the gift of God and that no one should be compelled in their conscience. May the spirit of religious freedom, hospitality, and mutual respect guide our partnership in the coming year. In a world that often seeks to divide, may we continue to be the bridge builders, carrying the light of reason and the warmth of unconditional love. Last year, Nobel Prize winner in literature was a Hungarian writer, László Krasznahorkai. In his novel, he writes a lot about the fragility of human existence, about passing away, and about the mysterious order that permeates our world. I have two quotes from him. The first, evil appeared on earth with man. Our capacity of destruction has reached an intensity that could seriously endanger every valley, every swallow, every stone, every sunset. And at the beginning of the 21st century, we may already have reasoned and enough experience to say what is coming will not be a short crisis. The second, things do not turn out well, become human, have some idea of what would be right for the future, but because humans have the right idea about the present, namely an idea that is not only good for you, but good for everyone. That is, it doesn't hurt anyone, so it's good in general. My wish for the new year is that we can make wise individual, family and community decisions in the present that will make the world a little better and a more beautiful place. May the freedom of your conscience bring you peace. May your community be sanctuary for people who need love. And may the year of 2026 bring us closer together in our shared mission of justice, equity, and compassion. Happy New Year, boldog új évet. In faith and friendship, Zsolt Barabás, Unitarian minister from Várfalva.